Hello and welcome unexpectedly to Tennis Podcast Towers. We were supposed to be on site for this live show. We were supposed to be doing it in an hour's time, but if you've seen our social media, you will know exactly why we are here in Tennis Podcast Towers. It is absolutely chucking it down outside. David, it's 1 p.m. and David's already had an outfit change.
Yeah, I went out about 2 hours ago and I thought, oh, I'll get in really early because we were trying to do this live show on site in our media garden where we always record the podcast. And I thought, I'll go extra early and I'll meet my old friend Alex Kennison, who I used to go to Wimbledon with in 1995, and we'll have a coffee and it'll be lovely. And then I'll set up and everything will be delightful. And then we can do the live show on site before I just head into my commentary. And I got about 100 yards down the road, and then the downpour of all downpours came, like one of those ones in the films, that happen in New York, but never happened in Solihull. And unfortunately, the doorway that had a bit of cover was about 100 meters away from me. So I did my best Usain Bolt without pulling the hamstring. So it was, it was fast enough to sort of completely save my skin, but not fast enough to stop me from getting completely drenched and having a complete change of plan.
David walked through the door and said, I need to change my trousers. So that's the morning we've had, folks. I am going to confidently predict that the roof is going to be closed for today's men's final, just as it was for yesterday's women's final. And that was actually something we didn't talk about as a feature of the match because they closed it preventatively. And look, the skies were dark yesterday and you could feel the moisture in the air. The temperature, it wasn't that hot, but it was so humid. It did feel like it could burst into rain at any minute, but I don't think it actually did rain during the final. We have crept into a situation where it's just accepted now that roofs are closed preventatively, certainly for big matches where TV are definitely all on one match, and they fear any kind of interruption. And I don't know, do we have any feelings about that? It's not a particularly sexy topic to kick things off with.
It feels judgment call like to me. I don't, because it's never going to be exact, is it? But I mean, what I witnessed, when we were having a negotiation about whether I actually carried on to site once the rain stopped or came back here and did
It wasn't a
this.
negotiation, it was a series of angry messages from me.
Yeah. And it was very clear what I had to do. So I did. And then I started to make my way back to the apartment. And then another one came. And I actually ended up perching underneath a little news outlet, one of those kiosks with an overhang, standing next to two members of the NYPD. And both of them had guns. And they were very nice women who just acknowledged me and could tell that I was British, I think. Yeah. Because I was being polite about it. I wasn't like cursing. I was just.
I feel like you asked about roofs and David started talking about guns.
Yep.
Sorry. What do I think about roofs? Oh, I think it's
You
all
missed
right.
your chance, David. Matt, what do you think about roofs? Or can we just take a moment to shout out Hannah's spelling of roofs on Twitter, which is in a crowded category, one of my very favourite things about Hannah.
What's the spelling she's come up with?
It's ROOFVES.
Covering
all the bases.
Hannah, and we love it.
Yeah.
It works.
I don't feel great about it. Like, I didn't feel great about it at Wimbledon, where matches were played under the roofs and there was no rain. But equally, I think I would be annoyed if rain was in the forecast and they started the final without the roof, and then there was a big interruption and a big, shan't we close the roof? I think that would be frustrating as well. So I totally understand why they want to do it for these big matches where, TV is such a big factor as well. I do totally get it, but I'm not sure I feel great about it. I know that's a total cop-out, but that is how I feel.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. But I also feel like the genie's kind of out of the bottle and it's not going to go back in.
It was enjoyable the other night after all those days of stifling humidity when suddenly we watched that one match late in the evening with how air conditioned that stadium felt. I wasn't really aware how air conditioned it felt.
Well, that is one of the questions we've had in from the Foxy Bee.
Oh yeah.
My question is, does Arthur Ashe have aircon when the roof is closed? I'm interested to know the answer on this. It's confusing. The answer is yes, but you will feel it to varying degrees depending on where you are in the stadium. And actually, you feel it a lot more the higher up you are, because that's literally where the air is coming from. I actually think down on the court, you feel it the least. I think some, but it was a match a couple of days ago, wasn't it, where we watched, it was Shelton Djokovic. We watched from a lovely vantage point. We watched from a box. It was a lovely time. Quite close to the court, didn't we? And I still had my hand fan out, my electric hand fan, because it was so humid. And then we watched Alcaraz Medvedev, albeit later in the day, but the humidity doesn't tend to change with time of day. And I was cold for the first time in days, and it was wonderful. I've never been so happy to be cold. So yes, there is air conditioning, but it's kind of a variable thing, which you'd expect given the volume of the space that they're trying to condition. Anyway, that's the sexy chat out of the way. Quite disappointed there's no, I was going to say let's deal with the look back first before we look ahead to the men's final, but absolutely no questions have come in about who Coco Gauff's soft launched boyfriend might be. So I feel like I'm disappointed in you all. That's the research that Matt and I have been doing this morning.
And last night, I started on the bus home.
Have you got anywhere at all?
Oh, we've got theories.
There's a very prominent theory on tennis Twitter.
Oh. Am I allowed to know what it is or not?
Well, it's out there. But people think it's Ben Shelton.
Oh. Okay.
Good. I'm glad you asked, David. Good chat. Right. Let's go with Cara Beth Davies' question. Hello, Cara Beth. I didn't have Coco and Brad Gilbert coaching set up to win a Grand Slam this early on in the partnership. What has Brad managed to change in such a short space of time? And part two of the question is, would Coco have gone this far if she had been without him? My take on that is that looking at the Brad Gilbert data set of timelines of players that he's come on board with and what's ended up happening, this actually really fits with his pattern. He is a US Open jolt coach. I know he was with Andre Agassi for longer, and I know Andy Murray didn't win the US Open with him, but basically he comes in and either a few weeks or a few months later you win the US Open.
If I'm Brad, I am adding US Open jolt coach to my bio.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a great caption.
It's possible that this would have happened without Brad Gilbert. I think losing first round of Wimbledon was a massive factor in the timeline of the last few months, but losing first round of Wimbledon caused her to bring Brad Gilbert on and change her whole team. So I think it's probable that this wouldn't have happened now without the deployment of Brad Gilbert. And I say that fully realizing that I have mocked for 2 weeks what he appears to be bringing to the table. But that's, we're only seeing a fraction of it from the outside. Obviously, he is doing something more than make it physical, Coco. Because the data speaks for itself, I think.
Yeah, because it's not just the US Open that Coco Gauff has won. I think what's so interesting about this is that she's won her 3 biggest titles of her career in the last month or so. 500, 1,000, and now a slam. Like there's been a really meaningful build up through the summer to this moment. And we've seen just real progress in Coco Gauff's game. I remember watching her in Washington thinking, well, I'm not thinking about the forehand. For the first time in about a year, probably, it was immediately obvious that she was protecting that shot a lot better, and we were starting to see the other elements of her game. And I think that's what I've been so impressed with, how she's change the narrative around her, which was what she can't do for a long time, and it was, well, she can't hit the forehand as well as she needs to be able to hit, and now the focus has been on what she can do, and I think that messaging from Brad Gilbert and the coaching team as well. More generally, I do feel a little bit sorry for Pere Reba and all this. I mean, he has come on board as well, and I'm sure is an important part of the team. I do think that whatever message they're getting across, the most important thing is the way that they're getting across, and they're clearly connecting with Coco Gauff and helping her. And yet, I don't think this would have happened without that coaching change and with Brad Gilbert on board. Equally, I don't think Brad Gilbert could just pick anyone and win the US Open. I think he realizes that Coco Gauff is a very special talent in the same way that Andy Roddick and Andre Agassi were, and he's got something to work with. So it's totally sort of mutually beneficial for all of them. It's great for Coco Gauff to have Brad Gilbert and team on board, and it's great for them to be working with a player of Gauff's quality.
I'm going to do a follow-up question, which again, none of you asked, but but here we are. Do you think they will still be working together? I was going to say US Open next year, but even Australia next year.
Yeah, I do.
Think, yeah?
I do. I think they'll definitely have another year of this. I mean, I think that there seems to be a pretty good vibe between them, actually. And so I think it's the bigger question is US Open next year, and I suspect they will be working together there. But whether they're working together in 2025, at the start of 2025, is where I would question it. When I look at the length of time that Brad worked with Andy Roddick and Andy Murray, it was just over a year to 18 months when both of them, to be honest, I think started to tire of hearing what he got to say, because he's saying stuff all the time. And also he was saying stuff publicly in Andy Roddick's case, which I think he tired of, really. I mean, maybe it's just coincidence. Obviously, Roger Federer's career started to come into its prime, and Nadal, that was the only one that Roddick ever won, was with Brad Gilbert. Now, is that any coincidence? I think that would be unfair to put any cause and effect there, because he reached several Grand Slam finals after that, and he just lost out to some of the best of all time. So I don't think that would be fair. But in terms of what he actually brought, you only have to listen to what Roddick says. He makes complicated things simple, and gets them going out there with a very clear mind. And clearly, here listening to Coco Gauff yesterday, she hasn't had that a lot of the time. It's tough. She's got such lofty intentions and so much hype. She was struggling to know what's the best thing to do, and he's just simplified things. And he did the same with Roddick. He sort of somehow just fixed his backhand and made it reliable. And I don't think he changed technical things. He just got him to stop overcomplicating it. And I think the same's happened with Gauff with the forehand, and the results are there.
Hannah says we're getting quite a lot of questions in about the new big three in the women's game, which we did bury last night. We staged, if anyone that hasn't listened to last night's show, there was a funeral for the new big three. We went early. We regret it. It could still return. We reserve the right to resurrect the new big three for sure. But I'm going to amalgamate a few questions in here. One from Russell Miller and a few others. If you've asked about the women's big three, good on you. It's a good line of questioning. Russell wants to know how Naomi Osaka on her comeback might fit into that, and a lot of people concerned about Rybakina. I think confirmation that the big three is for the moment dead. Can we have I mean, it is, isn't it? And Rybakina is a worry. I don't worry about her game. I don't worry about her being good enough to remain in a big 3/4/5. I worry about her fitness big time at the moment. She needs an off season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I still, yes, maybe wouldn't limit it to three, because the developments have happened. Maybe Gauff is coming into a wider group now. Maybe Osaka can join it. But I really don't feel like that. I feel there's enough there from Sabalenka, Rybakina, and Swiatek over the last 18 months to feel very confident that they are going to come again and still be better than most, better than all the others, really.
Perhaps that was we we were talking about Gauff channeling her inner Murray yesterday, weren't we? Perhaps there's a big 4 Coco Gauff Murray crossover that we didn't make that connection with last night, but I'm thinking about now.
Marketa Vondrousova says hi though. Wimbledon champion backed it up with a quarterfinal here, despite not being fit.
Oh, as I said yesterday, I think, as David said, Sabalenka, Rybakina, and Swiatek for a little period there did really prove themselves to be a level above everyone else, but that is not true if they've not won the last 2 majors. And it was always a bit of a stretch. It was we definitely went early with big 3, but I know why people were going with it. But there are so many players who can win majors on the WTA tour. And to answer Russell's question about Naomi Osaka, I think it would be unfair to sort of load her up with expectations. We don't know, but at her best, Naomi Osaka on a hard court, I think, is ahead of everyone else. I think
if she can reach peak Naomi Osaka, let's not forget she was doing the back-to-back hard court slams. She was utterly dominant
and so good at peaking in big matches, in big tournaments.
Surge. Do you remember the Naomi Osaka surge? Oh.
That one against Garbiñe Muguruza that time in Australia, I think. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Naomi Osaka can get back there, and for me, the only question I had over that has sort of been answered this fortnight with what she's had to say in her appearances here at the US Open, which is sort of hunger and commitment. She seems more hungry and committed than ever, in which case I absolutely think she can get back there, and I absolutely think she'll be a factor. And whatever the big number ends up being, I think she'll be one of them. Some people asking actually one person.
Sorry, that's an interesting point. How high can the big number go up to?
The Big 10.
Yeah, I think it needs to be capped at 4?
It definitely stops before Barbora Krejcikova, though, doesn't it? Sorry, Barbora, but
she could come again now as well.
She could, but I don't. She's a long way from being part of the big anything.
6.
Big it would 6 have to they have in the Premier League, don't they?
It would have to be a big
go up to
15
6,
at the moment to include Krejcikova.
Do feel for her. She's clearly had a rough time of things since that. So I hope she does. I really love her to come again. But then I feel like that about so many of them. There's a lot of really enjoyable to watch players out there.
We have just a quick follow-up question that includes Naomi Osaka. Dark-Q asks, whose comeback are you most excited about or will be most successful in 2024? Badosa, Osaka, Kerber, Raducanu, Wozniacki, Svitolina. Osaka for me, with Raducanu a close second.
I'd love to see Raducanu as part of it. I really would. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because she's British. I would love to see her. It was so exciting 2 years ago. But Osaka as well. I mean, those two for me.
Badosa for you, Matt? The thing with Badosa is it very much feels like she's not away. Like,
she's a big part of my life.
She's more present than any injured tennis player has ever been.
You need to address your follows.
Look, we're journalists, David.
Okay.
We're keeping across things for the people. We have a question in from Anastasia. This is a very good question. Based on Coco's winning speech, what are your thoughts on amateur experts making predictions on players' games / careers and how that affects athletes? And you can probably throw Casper Ruud's comments in there.
Yeah, Casper Ruud kind of set the tone for the tournament, really, didn't he? When he started talking about tennis experts on Twitter and their opinions. Is that a slightly pointed question
Don't
from Anastasia?
know.
Are we
I
amateur experts?
I would say,
making
Anastasia,
predictions? I feel like we very much are.
If amateur experts aren't your thing, you're probably in the wrong YouTube channel. What I would say is just specifically into relation to what Coco Gauff said last night on court and followed up about it in the press conference. There are some journalists kind of taking that pointedly, aren't they? I don't think she was talking about journalists. She's 19. She's not listening to the tennis podcast. I don't think she's in the live chat right now. I don't think she's reading newspapers or even online articles about her. I think she's talking about people on Twitter and TikTok. I really do. And I think that, as we discussed on last night, and comments on Instagram, social media stuff. And I think that if you're the sort of person that is fueled by that kind of thing, fueled by doubters, and she's obviously self-aware enough and knows herself well enough as a person to identify that streak in her and identify that can be used as fuel. Like, you can find people on TikTok and Instagram doubting you. Literally anybody on the planet will be able to find that if that's what you're looking for. And look, I know there's probably a wider question in there, Anastasia, about amateur experts, but just to take the Coco Gauff issue, that's how I feel about it. I didn't feel any kind of slight from her in that comment.
I hold my hand up and say that I'm definitely one of the ones who doubted her. But part of the job of running a tennis podcast and that is having opinions, having a guess, having a sort of look at what you see and say what you think. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. It's okay. I would say that I think we try pretty hard not to just throw them around for effect. I mean, I don't think we do that, and I think some people in sports media do. I don't know about tennis. I can't think of people in tennis who do that really, but there are some people that will make their names getting clicks by saying something outrageous that they know is going to get a response. We don't do that. We might mess about and poke fun at one another, but no, I mean, I would never want to be gaining clicks just because I've said something outrageous and that
like 12 slams in a row.
I believed it in my heart with 3 beers inside me and on the euphoria of watching what I'd seen, and I still think he's going to get a healthy number out of those 12.
Arvind asks, I know this will be affected by recency bias, perhaps, but of the 3 slams this year, which one had the best women's tournament?
Oh, good question.
Great question.
Not this one. I would say narrative-wise, maybe this one. I mean, Coco Gauff winning.
Yeah, there's
an incredible story.
There's 2 things here, aren't there?
Yeah,
I think
this was the best narrative, I would say. Like
Australia for the tennis.
I mean,
or am I too
I think that
blinded by the final?
The final was the best.
It's hard not to be swayed by the final.
Finals weekend in Roland Garros was amazing. Like the Sabalenka-Mukova match was thrilling and dramatic. Swiatek Haddad-Maia, I think, is underrated. That was a good semi-final. And then Swiatek-Mukova was an outstanding final as well. We got to see Swiatek pushed for the first time at the French Open in such a long time, which was just brilliant to see. Wimbledon, like there was all of Alina Svitolina's matches, which were kind of stellar, and Ons Jabeur until the final was a sort of thrill ride. So I think matches wise, the other slams probably had the edge on the US Open, but Coco Gauff winning the US Open feels just so huge and like such a big moment for tennis, when someone who everyone's known about for such a long time sort of delivers and fulfills. I think everyone feels a sense of, well, there's a lot of people trying to take credit for it, put it that way. There's a lot of people like, I saw this coming. I was a part of this. And I'd say there's a collective feeling of just happiness for Coco Gauff. I've seen so much just positive emotions attached to this win for Coco Gauff in a way that, isn't always the case, I would say.
Want to move on to a few questions about today's men's final. We've got one in from Michael, who asks, if Daniil wins today, what gaming celebration would you like to see? The answer, Michael, is I don't want a gaming celebration because I won't know it, because I don't do it. I needed somebody in the Amazon gallery to tell me what the dead fish was. Not that I didn't love it. I want to see something that I can immediately identify and react to. I think the dream would be some sort of
Hell yes.
phone call vibe, but I think Daniil will be cleverer than that.
What about
somehow?
Oh
No, but that's too pointed at Djokovic. He wouldn't do that.
Okay.
He's only ever done a pointed celebration at Tsitsipas, hasn't
Yeah, the Tsitsipas dance is hard to
He
beat.
likes Djokovic, doesn't he?
Yeah.
They get on.
he? Isn't I mean, he is like an ambassador for a game, isn't he? I'm a bit worried about that.
Oh.
I've got into that football one because my son's had a console this last
FIFA?
year. Yeah.
Well, that's where the dead fish was from.
Right.
Okay, well, tell us
Well,
what else they
my
could
son,
see.
anytime I score a goal, he's like, "Do a celebration, Dad." I'm like, "Ah!" And I just start pressing all the buttons because I don't know how to do one, and they just start doing random ones. But and my son's more into these celebrations than he is the actual scoring. Yeah, some sort of. The problem is most of them are knee slides, and I don't think that would
be a
the
bad
greatest
No, Daniil.
idea.
Although we rewatched the 2021 men's final last night as #research, and we watched the dead fish celebration, and he really could have hurt himself doing that. He went down like a ton of. He really committed to it, which
Yeah.
I do appreciate about him. But yeah, if Daniil, if you're watching, please do some sort of riff on the
He
phone.
needs to win first.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if he loses and does
And
it,
does that
that
one.
probably wouldn't be the best idea, would it?
Oh, wrong number. Right. Another couple of questions about the men's final. Just going back through because we had some of them in early doors. Claiborne Brown asked, will Medvedev serve as fast as he did against Carlos to keep Novak off kilter rather? I think yes. And that was another one of our takeaways from rewatching the 2021 final. I mean, it's not totally tactical because that is how Daniil Medvedev plays, but he's absolutely aware of how disruptive it can be, particularly against someone as deliberate and slow, quite frankly, as Novak Djokovic.
I think he's been going bigger in that tournament and this tournament than anything in between, both in terms of the serve, that slapped down, flat serve, first and second if need be, no time between them, the ground strokes as well. I think that's his way of winning this match.
Hang on, I've interpreted fast as time between points. You've interpreted fast as
Honestly,
speed of
I believe
serve.
both.
I think
Oh,
both.
I
okay.
really, the way what we were watching last night and against Alcaraz is the quick fire nature of between points, but also slapping them, just not going for crazy length rallies. Actually, trying to take these guys on with his drives down the line, in particularly. It was really noticeable watching those two matches, and we watched them kind of back to back, didn't we, last night? And then I got into Federer against Djokovic from 2011, and I watched the entire first set of that at 2 a.m. That was a good idea. It's great fun. But no, I think he wasn't that aggressive earlier this year when he was having his runs. This surface, I think the skidding nature of it with his shots really works.
That's interesting though, because I think that Medvedev is pretty much the only player that Djokovic thinks that his lockdown mode might not work against. Like, yeah. I think that slightly freaks Djokovic out in this matchup. He's used to being able to say, right, I'm not going to miss. You're going to miss first. And Medvedev, when he's at his peak, has an ability to actually counter that and say, fine, I will take you on from the back of the court. And I think that's why we've seen Djokovic in some of their more recent matches, and generally, I would say, since the emergence of Medvedev, it does feel like Djokovic has incorporated more touch and variety into his game. He uses the drop shot more. He comes forward. I think he hits the forehand bigger than he used to. I think Djokovic feels like he needs to shorten the points against Medvedev in a way that maybe against other players, actually long points favour him. It's a fascinating tactical battle, because I think you're right as well. Like watching a lot of those points last night from the 2021 US Open final, Medvedev was having a lot of success being aggressive too. So, they're both adaptable players. They will sort of, I suppose, use the tactics that they think are necessary in the moment. But I do think that this is a very tough matchup for Djokovic because his wall mode comes back at him from Medvedev, and he's not used to that.
Yeah, I was struck in that 2021 final, rewatching it, how quickly he resorted to variety, how quickly he not abandoned his A game, but sidelined it a little bit. Yeah, it was pretty much from the first ball. Gopali asks, who among Novak and Medvedev has a better net game? Who has better feel and touch? I mean, Djokovic, I think, is the answer. Medvedev's not bad, but it's Djokovic.
Djokovic has become really good. I mean, maybe it's not the most conventional volleys. He's not serving and volleying that often, but he's become really solid. And once he's used his ground strokes to open up, either the cushioned stop volley or the angled one, or he's very reliable.
I think it's a
slam dunk.
That's a slam dunk for Djokovic. I was struck by how many of the sort of close-up net exchanges he was winning against Ben Shelton. That was a real gap in sort of quality, I think, between them as well.
Great question here from Russell Miller. Can I have a prime David Law motivational speech ahead of this final? Struggling to get pumped for it since Medvedev beat Alcaraz. Why is this going to be epic?
We watched 2021 last night, and
it wasn't epic.
Medvedev took him to the cleaners. At the end, though, when it was 4-love, Djokovic started to come back at him and got emotional, and the crowd got into it. As a reminder, this crowd is going to be into this tonight, and it will be divided. It won't be like Coco Gauff, so it'll be loud on both sides, which has its own thing, and there'll be real passion out there. Djokovic will bring his fans big time, but I think a lot of the locals will like the underdog. Some will like the greatness. I think that'll be interesting. But why I would be into this, and look, we went through the same sort of kind of, in inverted commas, mourning period over the fact that Alcaraz isn't in it anymore, and when we watched a few highlights of him, we were still just jolted by electricity that he brings. But after that 2021 final, Djokovic then started to turn the tables on him in their subsequent meetings by incorporating variety, and you just don't know what you're going to get from this match. It's not like Djokovic against Casper Ruud in the French Open final. It's not like Djokovic against Tsitsipas. As much as we tried to get ourselves into the mindset of Tsitsipas can do this, we didn't have any tangible evidence on a hard court really that was going to happen. We do here. There's a revenge mission on here, Russell. There's a revenge mission for Novak Djokovic against Daniil Medvedev. And there's Daniil Medvedev saying, I am the disruptor. I am not letting these two have their way over the tennis world while I'm about. I've seen off one of them. I'm going to see off the other. Let's get it on.
No one was expecting that to end on let's get it on, were they? Amazing. Are you sold by that, Matt? Because we watched that final and we really were like, oh, this is really interesting. We were genuinely hyping. And then as YouTube does, when one video finishes, it defaults to a sort of something that its algorithm thinks you might enjoy. And it defaulted to Alcaraz Medvedev. And we were like, oh, we are going to miss him. Yeah.
I'm excited for this. I am. I think we're due a good Grand Slam match between Medvedev and Djokovic. Like, their 2 in slams haven't been great. Blowout for Djokovic in the Australian Open final, and then obviously Medvedev 2 years ago in straight sets here. But a lot of their other matches have been very good or have very good sets. I think there's an interesting element in terms of, like, a second major for Medvedev puts him in a slightly different category, especially if he's got 2 wins over Djokovic in a major final. I think for Djokovic, he sort of played down the significance of the number of 24, didn't he? But
he did, yeah.
I do think, as much as he knows Medvedev is a really tough matchup, he also knows this is a chance to win a slam without having to beat the ever improving, fast improving Carlos Alcaraz. And I think, he's not going to want to let that go. And it feels big for Djokovic. If he wants to keep extending that Grand Slam lead, he needs to take them when he's got the chance.
Because what if he doesn't win, and then he goes to Australia and one of those two beats him again, and then Nadal comes back at the French Open and draws level? Imagine that.
I'm imagining.
I did find it interesting in that in the press conference, the last press conference, how much Djokovic kind of dismissed the 24 thing as not that big a carry. He said, I want more slams, but it's not specifically about that record, which usually Djokovic is really honest about chasing records when he is. So I do take him at face value on that. I found it interesting. Good question here from Stephen Wright. What do you think about the constant coaching Alcaraz was getting in the semis? Could it have actually backfired, further scrambling his ability to think through strategy? Now, we were watching from the seats, so we weren't hearing the coaching that was happening. I subsequently looked it up. My dad, hi Dad, drew my attention to it. I've received a photo of them all watching in my parents' living room. It's lovely stuff. Saying he was just as you described when you went out to watch a qualifying match.
Yeah, Diana Schneider's coach.
That is what was happening with Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero. I don't know whether for the whole match, but certainly for periods of that match, he was telling him where to serve every time. And I don't think that's healthy.
No, I don't think so. I think players need that ability to be able to sort of see a match tactically for themselves. Sure, get some help, but I think it's an important quality to be able to make decisions on your own terms. I didn't like it when I was sat in qualifying, literally right behind Diana Schneider's coach. It felt just like a total dependence. I mean, it actually worked for those few points that I was watching. Those serves did help, but it's such a tricky one with Alcaraz and Ferrero because kind of any other player, I would think, oh, it's too much. Like Alcaraz is too dependent on his coach, but Alcaraz has had so much success, and I think we saw the difference when Ferrero was not there in Canada and when he was there in Cincinnati. Alcaraz was a much calmer presence on the court. I think there is a comfort level that he gets from seeing Juan Carlos Ferrero just in the box. But that struck me, and having obviously we were in the stadium so we couldn't hear it, but that struck me as a little bit of a panic almost.
Yeah, it strikes me as a symptom rather than an issue in itself. I think they would both probably recognize this isn't ideal. This isn't what we want to be happening out here. But it is an indicator of how, well, he said himself, didn't he? I lost my head, of how scrambled his brain was. I'd be surprised if we saw that happen very often.
Be a good one to put to Ferrero when we next get a chance to speak to him.
Well, find a lawn, David, and loiter.
I will.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think it bothered me when I wasn't aware of it when I was watching the match. I was up there with you, and I didn't clock it either, but read about it, and that did make me think, crikey, you need it that badly? You don't know where to serve?
I'm going to do some quick fire questions here to end on, guys. All right?
Sure.
Olaf, are the honey juices worth the hype?
Yes.
X. Matt loves the honey juice.
I do.
He thinks it's worth all the queuing. I tried to tempt him with an Ace Paloma yesterday because the Ace Palomas come from a separate a Dobel tequila. Feel free to send us some. A Dobel tequila stand that has no queues generally. So I was like, Matt, you can have a honey juice in about an hour and 20 minutes, or you can have an Ace Paloma now. And he was all about the honey juice.
Yep. I stand by it.
Yeah, I'm into them too. I do slightly look at $22 and think, what?
I look at if you don't get I would say the price is the same whether you get the souvenir cup or not.
Yeah,
And if
that's
you're
the
not
tough
getting the
scene.
souvenir cup, that's a tough scene. You're getting taken to the cleaners. If you're queuing and paying $22, make sure you get that souvenir cup.
And,
But
and that is something that they need to have ready to go. Actually, they need to have the honeydew cups with the new champion on. I think
Absolutely.
available after the final,
yeah,
rather than a year later.
delay engraving the trophy, engrave those honeydews.
Exactly.
Souvenir cups. Question that came in early doors from Shane Ford. We're not going to end on this one, but downer of a question. Has this slam been a bit flat?
Goes back to what we were saying earlier. Matches wise, totally. I think when we're looking at matches of the year contenders, drawing up a shortlist for that later in the year, there will be very few from this US Open that come to mind. I think Alcaraz Medvedev the other night was probably the best in the men's tournament. The women's semi-finals were pretty dramatic, if not quality-wise that great. But story-wise, it's been great. You know, Coco Gauff, Ben Shelton doing his thing, Madison Keys. You know, from a sort of American point of view, I think that's important when you get home players doing well at slams. It pushes them on. But yeah, as hyped as I am for Medvedev Djokovic, losing Alcaraz Djokovic was a blow.
Couple more. Cara Beth Davies again. If Novak does lose today, will it be as heartbreaking a loss as the Wimbledon final? I think no, because the calendar slam.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay, that was quick. I'll line up the next one. Gopali again. Firstly says thank you for answering the previous question. He asks, I think sorry if not he, if Medvedev loses today and doesn't win a major again, who had a better career, him or Del Potro? It's a heck of a question, Gopali.
If Medvedev doesn't win another major,
Yeah.
Del Potro. Davis Cup.
World number one, Medvedev.
I'd go Del Potro.
More slam finals.
Given the injuries that Del Potro had to his stomach,
it's who had the better career.
I think Del Potro. I do factor in the amount of time he was forced to miss and yet still had those results. And the effect he had
I
on
think Medvedev.
Well, it depends. I mean, if Medvedev were to reach more major finals and not win them, that would
I think
factor
if
in.
you offered Del Potro Medvedev's career, he'd take it.
Cool. Well, I can't help put the injury into it, and he would have said absolutely, and I'd have ended up winning 5 or 6 majors if I'd have had Medvedev's fitness.
But I don't think that's the question.
I think it's part of the question.
Let us know, Gopali. You've got until we answer the final question to clarify. Jimmy PB said, Gilles Savara said a couple of days ago, paraphrasing M people. Do you know who M people are, Matt?
No.
I do. Even I know something music that Matt doesn't.
They weren't very good. He said that Medvedev has to search for the superhero within himself. Which superhero does Medvedev... Oh, it's time to call it a day, isn't it? Which superhero does Medvedev most resemble? We're live, Matt.
Oh, am I answering this? Which superhero?
David's singing.
Is there a person in The Incredibles who's very stretchy?
Yes. And also, back in the 80s, there was a member of the Fantastic Four who was very, very stretchy as well.
Is he? It's actually
Google.
Djokovic that's stretchy, though.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he's got those
Medvedev isn't stretchy,
but
I think
floppy.
Yeah.
But he's
That's not a superhero, though, is it?
Mr.
Mr.
Floppy.
Floppy.
Okay, this genuinely is the last question from MP Ossoff. Buffalo Bills or New York Jets?
Bills.
Are we saying who we think will win or who we want to win?
I think want to win, but please answer either. I'm sure MP Ossoff is desperate to hear my thoughts on the matter.
Well, Matt's a big Bills fan. I feel really torn because I've always liked the Jets and I've recently become a follower of the Bills as well. So I don't really mind 2 wins. I think the Jets will win.
I've got no idea who will win, but I do loosely consider myself a Bills fan because they played in the first and obviously one of the only NFL games I've ever seen, and I won't be supporting a team with Aaron Rodgers in it.
And it happens to
tomorrow
be
night.
one of the all-time games.
Look,
doesn't it?
I only show up for the big ones.
Everything's downhill from here.
I only show up for the big ones and ones that feature Rihanna. That's mainly my policy on NFL at the moment. But look, I'm very open to being. I'm genuinely excited about tomorrow night. Maybe I'll take it all back. You might have to delete some old podcasts where I slag off NFL. Thank you so much for joining. Apologies again for the time change, but David really did have to change his trousers due to soakage this morning. It was a very critical situation. We had no choice. We're very pleased that we were able to make this work and that so many of you were able to come. But sorry if you're watching this back non-live, having wanted to attend live but not being able to. It's not as ideal a tech situation as we had at Wimbledon, and that's something we're working with and figuring out as we go. But our intention is to keep doing these live shows as much as possible and to figure out tech solutions as we go. So thank you. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. If you're a friend of the Tennis Podcast, thank you first and foremost. And secondly, we'll be back tomorrow with a live Q&A show at the same time. And this one is going to be from here and was always going to be from here. So pretty confident the time of this won't change. It's 1 p.m. New York time tomorrow, which is 6 p.m. UK time and 10 a.m. West Coast time and some sort of time in Australia, probably the middle of the night, but you can do the maths. So if you're a friend, please join us for that. The link is in our friends newsletter.
Yes, we will be sending that out. Absolutely.
Great. So we hope to see as many of you there as possible. If you're not a friend, become a friend. The link is in our show notes. Enjoy the men's final, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you soon.